Earlier this month, Venezuela's socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro announced that his country had held a referendum vote to annex the Essequibo region from Guyana. The region, which is rich with oil reserves, has been part of Guyana for well over a century. And after the referendum vote, which has been described by many international observers as a sham, tensions in the region reached new heights, with both the president of Guyana and Nicolas Maduro meeting face to face last Thursday. Joining us now to help us better understand the potential conflict is Keith George, Guyana's ambassador to Canada. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us on Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me on, Mr. Clement.
We know that Guyana's president met with Maduro in St. Vincent on Thursday. Is there an update on if progress has been made to avoid armed conflict?
Yes, the two heads of state have agreed that they will do absolutely nothing to raise tensions between the two states. They have also agreed that there will be no military action between the two of us. We have had a history of working with Venezuela, and we have one of the things we are very concerned about even now is the fact that Venezuela has not been a very reliable treaty partner with us. But we are hopeful that on this occasion, Venezuela will adhere to what was agreed to at Argyle and St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And can you explain to us the 1899 border decision that is essentially the crux of the debate here? Has Venezuela made claims to the region in the past, or is this interest in the region new given the oil reserves that are there?
Well, it's a bit of both. The fact is that the British and Venezuela had a dispute in the late 19th century. The United States forced Great Britain to go to arbitration, and that arbitration was based on the 1895 Treaty of Washington, whereby both Britain and Venezuela agreed to treat the outcome of that arbitration process as a full, final, and perfect settlement of all the boundary issues. After that award on the 3rd of October 1899, Venezuela respected and honored the outcome of that process for 62 years before deciding in 1962 that just as Guyana was going towards independence, that the award was null and void, simply on a memorandum that was posthumously published by one of their junior lawyers, Mr. Malé Prévost, who decided that he would not allow himself to be questioned about his allegations because he instructed that memo that he prepared must not be published until after his death.
And just to give Canadians a better grasp of the region, how many people currently live there? Because I could assume the news for them hearing that Venezuela was potentially going to invade would have been quite frightening.
It's approximately 250,000 Guyanese living in the area, but I don't want, that is out of 800,000, but I don't want to also restrict it to the number of people living there. The Essequibo region is the most resource-rich region for our country. As a matter of fact, you may know, Mr. Clement, that we are working hard to make sure that we are fully prepared for climate change. 85% of our forest is still pristine forest, and the vast majority of that forest is in the Essequibo. That forest plays a vital role in our low carbon development strategy to 2030, and it also plays a vital role in terms of agriculture feeding our nation. So yes, it's 250,000 compared to our 800,000 population, but it's a very vital area of Guyana.
And one would assume that the Venezuelans under Maduro don't necessarily have that same climate record. And I guess the argument there would be not only would people be potentially displaced or absorbed into Venezuela, but the climate approach of the Guyanese government would be sacrificed at the same time. Is that correct?
Of course, because we have put the issue of maintaining our forest at the top of our priorities. We believe that we have to move towards making sure that that we contribute towards mitigating climate change. And you may know that we have the Araucana Rainforest Project, where we've set aside over 900,000 hectares of land for the international community to study how we can sustainably exploit forests. So that there's also an area that we are focused on and trying to make sure that the international community is a partner with us in combating climate change.
Ambassador George, in the first part of our discussion here, you mentioned that Venezuela has not been a respected party in regards to international treaties. There are all sorts of criticisms in terms of the Maduro regime honoring their word. We know that in the beginning of this conflict, Brazil had sent their troops to the border. Has the government of Brazil given security assurances should Venezuela go back on their word and invade?
Well, the government of Guyana has engaged all of its partners and allies as soon as this issue became front and center in terms of the threat that it posed to Guyana. And all of our partners are in solidarity with us. That includes the Commonwealth, the CARICOM, the OAS Secretary General, the Brazil, of course. And we have engaged with all of our partners to make sure that they are fully apprised of the threat that Venezuela posed at that time. That is before the heads met in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I just wanted to repeat what I said. Our problem is that Venezuela has not been a reliable partner, treaty partner, because of the fact that we have the 1966 Geneva Agreement that specifically says that if Guyana and Venezuela could not agree on a means of settlement, the UN Secretary General would step in and make that decision. The Secretary General has done so. Yet Venezuela is saying that the 1966 agreement does not provide that kind of authority to the Secretary General. The ICJ has twice issued judgments in terms of having jurisdiction over this issue. Venezuela is still insisting that the ICJ does not. So that's why I'm saying that they have not been a very reliable treaty partner.
Of course, of course. And the government of Venezuela announced that they held a vote and that more than 10.5 million people voted in that referendum. However, journalists and international observers report no lines ever formed at polling stations. In your view, was this referendum, beyond the very credible arguments you've made in terms of the international community and the ICJ, but was this referendum even legitimate in the first place? Do we have any reason to believe that this was something that Venezuelans themselves actually voted for?
Well, I think the footage that we've all seen will speak for themselves in terms of the response of the Venezuelan people. What I would say is that Venezuela has a right to decide what it would do in terms of consulting its population. What is not legitimate are at least two of the five questions that were put to the Venezuelan people that has everything to do with Guyana. That is the Essequibo and the people of Essequibo. No one in Guyana has ever said they want Venezuelan ID cards. So that should never have been a question that should have been placed before the Venezuelan people. So in terms of the legitimacy, I would leave that to the Venezuelans to decide, but the questions were not legitimate questions.
And so in one of those questions, just to clarify here, the question put to Venezuelans was to essentially absorb the population of that region and give them Venezuelan ID. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. That is correct. And to advance in some form or another the social development of the people in the Essequibo. Now, we all do know that over 7.3 million Venezuelans have more or less showed their confidence in what is happening in Venezuela by leaving. So our question is what it is that the Venezuelan government can offer the Guyanese people. And even if they wanted to make that offer, the Guyanese people will not accept it.
Of course. And I can only assume that the people in that region have no interest in being Venezuelan either.
It is interesting that there are at least 21,000 Venezuelan migrants who are living in Guyana, and they're all living happy lives. They're gainfully employed, and I'm sure if you ask any number of them, they will say they do not wish to go back to Venezuela, much as Guyanese who have bright prospects ahead of them.
Yeah, it very much feels like we have a tug of war between free and open country, and one that isn't. And I think you raise a very good point in terms of Venezuelans who have already fled and protested their regime by leaving the country. We have about 50 seconds left here. What is it that Canadians should know about why this issue matters?
This issue matters more importantly, because we want this region to remain a zone of peace. Secondly, there are many Canadian investors, not only in Guyana generally, but also in the Essequibo, especially in the area of mining. So this will have a direct impact on Canada's investment. Also, I want to stress the point that Guyana is not a threat to Venezuela. We're 800,000 compared to 29 million. If one were to add the 7 million who have left, it's 36 million. We do have a very small army. We have no Navy, no Air Force. So we couldn't be a threat to anyone. So we all know where that threat is coming from.
Ambassador George, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.